All right. Well, here we go with this one. And food is going to be ready in about an hour, so I'm going to try to make sure this stays less than an hour. This is also not a real stream, quote unquote, anyways. So, need to go over here. It is still a professional stream, however. You'll see why in a minute. Just go over here, make sure that's set up, get the loading done. Back over here, live chat up. Hello. All right, so obviously we will actually need Google Earth up for this one. And I don't know if it's visible. Oh, it is actually visible on the screen. So you see this thing on the side here. I finally did it. I finally got it. The thing that professional streamers use, quote unquote. Here, let me demonstrate on something here. Here's an airport. So get this is the generic pen, right? What's our size? Yeah, that's big enough, but maybe make it a little bit bigger. And clear. Oops, no. I don't want to. Oh wait, I have to switch back. There we go. So I can zoom out a bit, then click on the pen again, and I can circle stuff. I can draw on the screen like a professional. I can actually do it now. I finally got the stuff. I am no longer an amateur who is just using the mouse cursor. Nothing else? All right, so live or not, whether anybody is watching this afterwards or anyone other than Andrew is actually here now, I've mentioned before that amongst my actual like non-fan fiction category, like original writing things, one of them I've been doing for a while is an actual uh, alien invasion scenario, really loosely. Well, let me see if I still have the image there. Loosely in line with or based around the initial scenario that the film Battle Los Angeles tried to put forward. For context, these are the aliens landing impactors coming in to make water landings off the coast of LA. These big puffs are where, both in Battle Los Angeles and in my scenario story that I'm working on, they fire. There's more of them further up in the atmosphere. This is just the last time they fire that you can see before they actually hit the water. Each of these puffs along their trails is where they fired their powerful reentry thrusters for either the first, second, or final time, and then obviously punched through the exhaust or through the smoke, which leaves these rings afterwards. So, if you did not ever see Battle Los Angeles, it was decent enough. It was decent enough. It just eventually let go of where it was a good film and started to go off the rails, primarily because the main character it had like main characters and they started to become main characters, and as the main characters they were invincible, and in the end they like single-handedly defeated the not the whole alien invasion force, but the alien invasion force that was in Los Angeles. They basically single-handedly figured out like the secret weakness that the aliens have because they always have one. So obviously, as I've insisted, as grounded as it can be in physics and military realism, for one, there in again regarding my scenario, there is no weakness to exploit. They are that they are a they're a attacking aggressor military force, just like any military force on Earth is an attacking aggressor military force. And let's see, what else do we have? Oh yeah, things to probably get out of the way really quick that would hopefully be obvious if you know me, and you know like the intelligence level I prefer in terms of ideas and also dealing with people. Uh, they none of the like Independence Day stuff. They're not a damn hive mind. The aliens that are doing this, although you will never see anything like written from their perspective, obviously, but they are like individual, sentient sapient beings. They're not this kind of weird queen and insect hive mind thing. And also, they're not, changing objectives between now and the sequel because there is no sequel, and their objective isn't completely stupid and pointless, like sucking out our molten core, even though they could do that to literally any non-inhabited planet with no resistance that also has a molten core. Uh, and let's hold on. What were some of the other dumb ones? Oh yeah, although I like the movie Signs, the one with Mel Gibson, that one was really dumb because apparently the motivation was that they came here for us as food. Like they literally abducted a few million people to eat for like I don't know, like alien McDonald's or something. They come here with with actual objectives. They do have an aim as to why they're here. However, as said in the description of you can't see it on here as this is the live thing. As I wrote in the description, it's not an invasion because logistically, feasibly, across the interstellar gulf of space, it could not be an invasion. That's just not possible. There will be no legitimate like means of resupply outside of what I categorize as Star Trek slash Star Wars, BS technology. Unless you can light speed jump and like slip space rupture detected, like some Halo nonsense. And there's no form of resupply or anything, or reinforcement, or actual communication with those back on your own planet. So anyone coming here like they do, uh, both in the film, uh, but especially more so focused on in my story idea, is they are on their own. Like that is it. This is not D-Day, uh, because there is no interplanetary or interstellar D-Day. That's not a thing you could do. This was A. Uh, this is the only force, and B. This was a one-way ride. No matter how you look at it, even if they won, and I'm going to put that in big quotation marks, even if they won, and the reason we're at Tokyo is because that's the first like battle site or impact zone, both in the movie and in my story. Actually, I don't remember where it was in the movie first. I thought it was Tokyo, but I think they were also landing off the coast of Mexico somewhere, off of some really small city like Mazatlan for some reason. But this was a one-way trip. Those who came know They are actively aware that it is a one-way trip. And even if they were to quote unquote win, which there would be varying definitions of that strategically from their end, even if they like somehow wiped us out, they're still not going back. There's no physical way for them to get back. But it's not an invasion. There is no intent to like govern over or occupy us. They did not actually bring any form of like force that would be like categorized for that anyways, because they couldn't. Because these aliens actually obey the laws of physics. So, uh, wait, where's it? So you see these. These are from the poster. One of the posters I already described. This is their entry process into our atmosphere. So they cannot travel faster than light because you can't. In theory, you could, if you had literal magic and could conjure infinite energy, because warping space, folding space time, that is possible. That is actually physically possible. That is something that can be done to the fabric of space time. However, the energy required to constantly be applied to space time in a specific way around a vessel to maintain, something like quote unquote warp speed, like from anything from Star Trek to Star Wars or slip space like Halo. The amount of energy needed to just incessantly apply to it is not something that you can legitimately, in any feasible future, technologically output consistently. Uh, Hold on. What was I going to look up? Solar sail is the wrong. Well, it's kind of the basis of the same idea, but hold on. It was breakthrough. Oops, delete the F. Star shot. So yeah, it's the way that they. Why do you have to make it so small? So the way that why is it so small? What is wrong with you people? So the way that they get here, they are from the Proxima Centauri system because if they're any further away, it's really not going to work. So they used a idea that we've actually had already that we could legitimately do with like our existing technology. We've already made light sails, and we can easily make a large laser battery or concentrated like platform of multiple lasers, like in this diagram here, and point them all at a specific thing. Our idea was our idea was that we could eventually. Why is it? Why are you making these things so small? Is it bigger on here? Of course it is. So our idea has been that we could make something, make a sail, attach it to the size of a regular space probe, like attach it to, a Voyager or a New Horizons equivalent, and then we would have a collection of big laser batteries on Earth or on the surface of the moon, and use, the directed power equivalent, divert power from, one or two nuclear power plants and focus lasers on that, and you could send it zipping off with that kind of laser power concentrated on that sail for a few weeks or a few months. You could theoretically get it up to something like 20% the speed of light before it would be a bit too far out for the lasers to really matter anymore. So that's something we could do right now, and we've considered doing in the future. However, what they did is, and this is, it's never explained in the movie how they got here, but in my story for this, they built similar things just on a bigger scale for large, like semi soccer field or stadium sized or small stadium sized spaceships. And since they're clearly a civilization that has a form of global authority on their own world and the will and desire to do this, they sort of build a much larger amount of laser batteries and force their population to just suck it up and deal with it with prolonged prolonged months of mandated blackouts as they dedicate basically huge portions of their entire planetary power output and power generation into these lasers to thus be able to send like sizable spacecraft off at those kinds of speeds. So the journey for them is still a few decades, and they do have to perform multiple flow down or thrust. Uh, what's the retrograde burns along the way once they've passed two thirds point of the journey. They have to perform a few retrograde burns with some pulse fusion engines, which are also things that are realistic that we could make. They would just be enormous. They would just be prohibitively expensive for us to do, which is why we're probably never going to do them. However, uh, these guys don't really, or those who made the decisions for these guys to come here, really don't care about the expense issue. They kind of just wrote that off. So there is a means, like the most realistic means we can think of that would work, is you could effectively have something like a it's either, is it called ramjet or scramjet? Uh, yeah, it's stuff that that's copyright. Can't have that on screen, of course. So in ramjets, it's basically it relies on like scooping up the air and stuff, and it's designed in a way so that the faster it goes, the faster it goes. Something similar to this, but as a quote unquote hydrogen scoop, a space ramjet sort of. Something like that has been idealized before and would work. That if you put something like that on a spacecraft that's going interstellar distances, then over that course of time, because space is not actually empty, it's just really undense or really, really not dense. It would still pick up hydrogen along the way, especially if you're going a really long way, like interstellar distances. And so they have said hydrogen scoops on the spacecraft. In my version, again, none of this was ever explained or explored in the movie. So they pick up enough over the trip to repeatedly at several points use for retrograde burns to slow down as they approach the Earth, and then have that little bit extra left over to use for these actual like air braking burns as they're coming into the atmosphere. So in the film, they hit a lot of places, not all of which made sense. Like, for one instance, they attack Tokyo, but then in another instance, apart from Los Angeles up there, like I said, where's Mazatlan? Mazatlan's like right here, right? yeah, they also like land at and attack Mazatlan, which makes, no sense because Mazatlan is a really small like Mexican resort town. It's kind of like if anyone's been to Myrtle Beach in the US, up there in northern South Carolina, it's basically like it's like Myrtle Beach, just in Mexico. So them attacking Mazatlan makes like zero sense, but that's what the film said. So that's what happens in the film. Also, they have to land in deep enough water, but so according to the film, somehow one of the places they attack is Moscow, which is very inland, apart from some rivers and some lakes. Which, no matter how good you are with your telemetry, you not really stand a good chance of actually aiming and hitting those unless you're familiar with this planet and you've all these satellites in order to lead you instant tracking telling you recently where you are so you can just on the go. So that made no sense. So I've reset who gets attacked, where, and why. And I've also reset like the whole scenario of how everything comes about. Can you see the moon if we rotate around? Like, I don't care if it's accurately placed where it's supposed to be right now. Can you see it on Google Earth? I don't think so. Darn, doesn't look like it. So, in the film, there are multiple points where you see on the news them talking about this incoming swarm of meteors that were suddenly detected like just 2 days ago. And then when they start hitting offshore of Los Angeles, in the briefing that the main characters get before they go out into combat, they contradict themselves by stating that these were not, none of these were detected until they started entering the atmosphere. Except that's not true because you literally had it on the news multiple times over 2 days in film that they were discovered 2 days prior to the start of those 2 days. So they wanted, I guess, in the script for it to be like a super surprise and to get us like hyper taken off guard. But I switched, that out for us, actually getting the hint, when we would get the hint, which at first is all right. Audio is off, so I can't get copyright for that. I'm going to keep it freeze framed and hopefully not get a copyright strike. Okay, no, that is already. All right, that's already at the point where things are ongoing. Come on, hold up. That's first contacts. Blah 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 blah. Uh, hold up. Might be this one. No, that's talking about the actual stuff. That's from the stuff they watch in the movie at one point. That's from the actual Battle LA event in real life. Title is wrong. Characters are Marines. They're not Army. But anyways, right. Looks like I can't get it that way. I don't want to use you guys, but I might have to. All right. Apologies, Egyptian dad, and I forgot what his son's name is. I'm not trying to, use you guys like for profit or anything. I'm just trying to get the initial image off you guys since I don't know what clip I'm going to find it in. Right, where is, yeah, I think it's the news when the black dude is in the flower shop. Yeah, like this one. Maybe use the rapid scroll. Come on, can we get it? Can we get it? I just want to see the the NASA imagery scene. Come on, come on, come on. I don't care about the romantic attachments of the characters who are, like BS levels of invincible. Damn it. All right. No, can't get it that way. All right, never mind. So zoom out from Earth, and if this were real here, it would actually show you the moon. But uh, people in my version of how the story will go, people initially message NASA, like amateur astronomers message NASA on like Twitter and stuff, saying, "Hey, you might want to check this out here and get an answer for this before some kind of conspiracy or Gerard Butler Greenland hysteria starts up." And that is because NASA and other space agencies are not omnipotent. They don't have like a bajillion telescopes that are literally watching every spectrum, every sector of the sky at any given time. We have a limited number of really expensive telescopes worldwide that are looking at really specific things. So when it does tell you, when you do see in movies where like a more amateur astronomer like informs NASA or somebody else about something, and they then look at it and discover that, say like it's an asteroid, that part is actually realistic. That is the one of the few things that happens in like Hollywood movies that seems unrealistic, but is actually closer to what would happen than you would think. So in this scenario, some people start noticing uh, in like one sector of the sky, they start noticing that there's some really faint lights appearing that are to their telescopes, through their telescopes, they look about as dim as the Pleiades do to your naked eye. And so people start like, sending images of that to NASA and, tell NASA, hey, you might want to take a look at this, just find out what's going on before, something uh, similar to the New Jersey drone hysteria starts up. And so they, along with other partners like Roscosmos and the ESA and JAXA over in Japan, do take a look and notice that there's these lights and that more keep appearing like by the hour. And as they take closer looks from different angles, they start turning instruments like away from other projects, and they start taking, like what's it called, parallax calculations. They realize that, these things off out there a little bit, they're not that actually no, hold on. That's the wait, where ooh, I can't find where am I? Okay, that's Orion. Uh Proxima Centauri's Orion is ooh, wait, is Orion towards or away from? Okay, that's the thicker parts. That's towards the galactic center. So this part is the over here would be the outer arm. That's Orion. Okay, so Proxima Centauri is out this way and down a little bit. I forgot which constellation it's actually in, but it's out there and down a little bit, away from galactic center relative to where the sun's solar position is. So NASA takes a look at the things along with their partners over the course of about a day or so, and they are able to quickly enough see based on, how based on what distance they're crossing and how that appears from, multiple angles, that these things are actually really close. They're at the time of looking at them, they're only 7 AU away, which is 7 times the distance between the Earth and the Sun. And they're approaching rather rapidly, but then, as those observations go on for like even just a few more hours and more math pours in, they start realizing that they're slowing down. And they seem to be on a very, very, very particular course that's going to, take them on an intersection of the orbit of a very specific planet. Now, at first, they do run with the more realistic assumption that it is, some large meteor or comet that has broken into multiple now very reflective pieces that might be on a course to have some of them impact the Earth. And they do then, like, start talking to their respective governments, who start notifying the other governments, at least those they care about at first. And they start drawing up plans for, if necessary, a quick mobilization of military units and National Guard units in the event that we're about to look at some kind of potentially large scale natural disaster. However, then it changes, obviously, as they keep looking at the things over, now like day 2 or 3, and they watch more of them appear. When they look at them within like other spectrums, especially like the X-ray spectrum, they see a very unique flash that appears right before each new light will then appear. And that flash is the initial X-ray burst of a nuclear ignition, which is what you would see from even a small pulse fusion rocket, which, like I said, is a real design that even we, but each one would cost like probably in excess of $1 trillion. So what we're going to do is regular nuclear rockets, which is just where you have uh, a small nuclear reactor like that on a submarine, and then you vent the hydrogen fuel through the reactor so that it gets superheated and goes out a nozzle and allows a spaceship to travel like about 4 times as fast as we're able to get stuff to now with just basic chemical propulsion. But we're hoping we might have some viable initial first nuclear engine models around like 2050. But anyways, once they see that, to the people at NASA and Roscosmos and ESA, JAXA, Indian Space Agency, and everybody else, to them in that moment, yeah, kind of hits and it becomes instantaneously obvious what's actually happening. And then they have to have the awkward conversation with their respective militaries of what they now realize is actually happening. And then behind the scenes, because I don't care about political drama, sometime in the story behind the scenes, there would be, as there would be IRL, some lengthy discussion about whether they really want to accept that this is actually happening. But after a few hours, hopefully at most, the reality is actually, you know, forcibly accepted. And unlike in the film, they're not sudden shocks like with zero warning. There is about once it is fully accepted that uh, you know, it's aliens, it's really aliens this time, then it's about between 48 and 72 hours from when the first ones will end up arriving, impacting in the water offshore of Tokyo. So, and I chose that initially just because I was still in the mood of trying to be similar to the film, where it looked like they should have had 2 or 3 days of actual warning and preparedness time that they didn't act on, because they contradicted their own lore in film. Not that I really think this film cared about its lore, but so there is a 48 to 72 hour like actual warning window from which we actually realize that it's literally aliens. Like it's actually literally aliens. And from that point on, then you get into like what the most likely first chapter will still be, which I have written. Each one is from a different type of like perspective, but they're made to be kind of locked in your perception. There's no singular character, so it's not literally you, but it's someone who could easily be you. And one of the first ones is literally scrolling through Twitter, because that's how people find out about a lot of stuff now. We tweet some cats, and it's literally, uh, if he ever watches this, and I end up writing this legitimately, Yakub can give me permission or not give me permission to make it actually him in story. But it's meant to be from the perspective of you, like looking at, say, someone like some OSINT guy, like his Twitter account, as they start posting stuff, because they start, getting messages and hearing, military developments, except instead of about Russia and the Ukraine war or about Syria, it's about stuff that they don't know the reason for immediately, but they quickly start posting a lot of stuff about how at first they're hearing from, people they know in the US who are either on leave or are in like reserves and are all like DMing him or whoever the character may be, they're all DMing him that they've suddenly got a, activation notice or their leave was suddenly canceled. And others who, before they got their phones confiscated, were able to like send a quick DM saying, telling him, hey, you know, the Air Force base I work at, out of nowhere, we just got like a red flag, quote unquote, drill alert, and we've been told to arm all the aircraft as fast as possible. And that's not something that doesn't happen. That does happen. You do get random preparedness drills that happen. Like when my parents were mechanics, aircraft mechanics at Otis Air Force Base back on Cape Cod, that did happen actually frequently. It happened even more frequently at the Air Force Base they worked at over in South Korea, back in the late 80s or early 90s. But even at Otis, they did have a few of those, like random drills. They were just told, like red flag or whatever, arm all the aircraft as fast as possible. And even during the drills, uh, both on when they actually did it in response to 9/11 and during like just drills, just practice, they were still able to get like all readied munitions onto all 20 something of the F-15s in usually between 16 and 18 hours. So a 48 to 72 hour window is justifiable enough, story wise, to where as long as the orders start coming down and the hammer starts clanging on the blacksmith's anvil, at the start of those 48 to 72 hours, you could have a rather decently prepared, just military on standby for whatever the situation ends up being. And plus, actually, this, as the story takes place in roughly present day, an unspecified time in the 2020s, this would actually be one of the better times for it to happen, in terms of your and all over here. and even over here on both sides of everything. And now even here a little bit recently because of some new tensions between Pakistan and India. Right now is actually one of the more heightened like alert times that we've been on in most places of the world for in terms of like military expectancy. So that starts going, and you go through this like one chapter of going through, like scrolling through, or rather hitting the refresh button constantly on this. Why are you showing me a stopwatch? Stop. Of constantly hitting the refresh button as more of these start coming in, and then he uh, you know, eventually hears that there's supposedly some kind of international remote meeting. Of course, obviously, there's no time to fly anywhere, but there's some kind of international, like broad security remote meeting going on that for some reason is being conducted between not just US and members of NATO, but also has uh, Russia, numerous Middle East countries, India, China, and many others present, which, to from a basic standpoint, if this was not already the context, or if you didn't know this context because the general public does not exactly know yet, that would sound rather alarming, and it does. And they realize obviously they can't exactly keep a lid on that forever. So there is inevitably a public announcement everywhere, like worldwide, that, hey, check it out, guys, it's aliens. So different places react differently. In the US, of course, rioting and looting breaks out immediately, like it always does. Aliens are about to show up and kill everyone, but you still gotta steal that PlayStation 5 and that 60-inch OLED TV. Maybe the aliens might trade it, might like trade you something for it for all you know. You can get like a plasma rifle off them. So, and from that point, so it begins, and various different points are targeted, and they don't all. This is one thing the film got really everywhere. The aliens land everywhere at once. Somehow, even though they're clearly not in a Star Trek position where they are just magicking their way through space, they are clearly beholden to orbital mechanics. Kind of as you can see, they're not using anti gravity or anything. So, in a real setting, that would not work. They would have to. How far out can I zoom? That's it. All right. Well, imagine the Earth is a lot smaller on the screen. So as they're coming in, they would have to be, and because this is how their propulsion setup would have worked initially with the laser batteries and stuff, they would have left in segments, each one after the other. So they would be in a staggered approach. In that, as the Earth is turning, that would enable them to then arrive and fall to different locations. And as they get nearer and they actually get a clear look at the planet's geography and setup and everything, then they can vary the time of their approach burns and their reentry burns, and vary the number of thrusters for a bit of directionality, so that they can have some decent enough control over where they're going. But it happens on a like one additional arrival every 2 hours or so, with the first one, as I said, being right there on the X off of Tokyo, and the second one happening right here off of Seoul. The third one happening off of, oh, sorry, not there. Where's the back under that? Actually happens a bit farther out off here, off the coast of Hong Kong, Macau, Shenzhen, basically the whole Pearl River Delta. It ends up on the Wikipedia page for this whole thing for the War for the World. That subsection is labeled Battle of the Pearl River or Battle of the Pearl River Delta. So those are the first three, each one impacting about 2 hours after the other. And South Korea, ironically, or not ironically, I guess, despite being so heavily militarized on all sides and having, China right there as well, this is the one that ends up having the one where we do fight that ends up requiring the least amount of fight because the topography in this area is really unusual. You see, Korea, both north and south, are really mountainous. And normally, when you have big mountain valleys and stuff that, descend into the sea, normally, like back up home in Alaska, you end up with things called fjords, which is where like the mountains will, come down like that, and they'll come down towards the sea, and say the water level will be like this, and it keeps going down because they're steep mountains. However, as you can see by the lighter color here, that's not what happens right next to the western side of Korea. In a sort of anomaly, the like descending mountains just abruptly stop, and it just goes flat, and not a deep kind of flat. So this leads us into another point, which the aliens are not omnipotent somehow. They don't have magical space knowledge. Their first real idea of our like geographic layout and ocean layout and everything is as they're getting close enough, like near the edge of the solar system, to get like legitimate visual optical looks at us. And that's how they base their targeting off of, is they just look for what are the biggest gray blotches. They're looking for huge, like dense points of civilization. Tokyo is one of the densest on Earth, and it's very close to several other dense ones, so that's why they pick it. Seoul is incredibly dense and basically extends, all down south through the rest of it. And, it's right across from here, so they could theoretically fly over that distance and do stuff if they wanted to. You can see, even from this altitude, how, dense and widespread the Hong Kong, Shenzhen, Macau, Guangzhou area is. So those are why they pick like these specific areas that they do. And this doesn't always work out for them because sometimes they end up, off of really inconsequential areas like Buenos Aires, which is, a big metro spread for sure. But apart from the wheat, apart from the grain, no offense to Argentina, but there's not much going on down there. There's not that much of like a critical hit to deal to us as a civilization by like wiping out Buenos Aires, for example. Didn't the who also? Oh yeah, the bugs and Starship Troopers did that too. So it does anger 30-year-old actors that are playing supposed high school students, though. It will get them very angry for anyone who catches that reference. So here, though, they and as they're approaching, oh yeah, like I said, they do not like magically know everything. They can gauge the rough changes in water depth uh, based on really last minute orbital LIDAR, which is how we do it. For the places that we have not like truly mapped out the specifics of, that you would still find blurry on like a bathymetric globe, we do that via satellites. I think it's LIDAR. I might be mistaken. It might be just regular radar. We do that via satellite LIDAR. and it's very rough because it just cracks minute differences in the surface of the water, which is affected by the shape of the ocean beneath it. So it doesn't like tell you XYZ is this deep. It does tell you, hey, this part right here, this drops down from this and is therefore, probably this much deeper than this. But you do need to know how deep this over here is already to then know how deep that would be. So seeing this and seeing the mountainous setup, they assume that this water initially right off South Korea's coast will be really deep, like fjords normally are. They are incorrect about that assumption, though, and quite a number of them, the first impactors that come with this wave to this site, end up hitting too hard at coming in too steep, or is it? I think it's. I consider steep when you're like coming in like this. Some people have said steep is when you're coming in really shallow like this. I considered that shallow, but in case I'm incorrect, just so you know, I'm referring to this. The closer you are to coming straight down, the steeper you are. So they're coming in steeper than they would need to because they're coming in at their normal water impact angle that they assumed that they would be able to use everywhere, or at least in most places. So a lot of them are still coming in too hard and end up hitting that shallow ocean floor and not exploding because that's not how it would work. But the impactor vehicles do end up breaking apart, and effectively everything that they're carrying with them is effectively lost and non-usable. Now, the last few that do arrive in off of Seoul, they do they catch on to what actually is going on here, and they do use extra burns at the last minute and do like shallow their angles out, and they're able to sort of successfully do a water insert landing. But some of them even still end up scraping and taking some damage from that, and they're just not able to offload that much in time to really start inflicting that much damage before they end up kind of getting just stomped by a surround sound of everybody who is in that region. And for hold on, out of Los Angeles, I should just be able to say ship, and that should give me the one I'm looking for. Why are you not in dark mode? I told you to be in dark mode. Some of this stuff isn't even from Battle Los Angeles. So there's several different angles on them. We'll pull up this. Come on, give me a better one. Pull up this. Oh yeah, there we go. That's a better one. And click on that again so I can get the view from the back. All right. So they another thing before jumping into this, but another specific thing that leads into that is, unlike in this film and in many other films, there are barely any actual aliens in this military force that arrives. Because again, it's not an invasion force because you just feasibly couldn't do it. There are barely any aliens that actually come with it, or any living sentient beings. There are like several, probably in total, there are several thousand, but there's barely really any there comparatively, because, as like I said, I'm trying to go as what I would consider grounded as possible. Realistically, there wouldn't be. They, as they supposedly did in the film, but then contradict themselves by having millions and billions of aliens, because the screenwriters wanted something for the Marines, for the infantry to fight. So they have these, and in mind, they will have similar vehicles, just with some differences. Like without, they really wanted them to look cluttered and clunky, like to a needless point. And that's like I just said, it's kind of needless. So they do have similar things to these. They have these punt thruster hover vehicle things that go around with a singular primary weapon underneath that, like in the film, I don't think there's a, or it might be, that might be a charging up there in the video game, or right before the burst. But they do have hanging from the underside basically, it would be best to call it a plasma spitter, as that's what I interpreted it as in film. It's listed in film, or sorry, on the official lore website that used to exist for the film. It's listed as a what did they list it as? They listed it as a incendiary thing. That it's like it's shooting white phosphorus. However, the things it does are not things white phosphorus would be doing. Some of them are, but the degree to which it cuts straight through so much stuff is stuff that you would only be getting out of like spraying a plasma jet, a brief one. So they do use sort of a plasma spit as a like brief plasma burst thing that comes out in a cone, and that's their like primary weapon that the hover vehicles and their ground vehicles, because they do have some of those as well, use. And there's actually a fit sort of physics grounded reason for that, which is I should have been looking at chat, even though no one is actually going to be saying anything. Blah blah blah. $5 what per barrel for lifting cost. That is a blatant lie. Shale baseline, even for new, really, really good shale like the Vaca Muerta shale is, it's usually around like 55 on the lower end, maybe 50. But anyways, in this scenario, do I think Argentina would continue being able to exploit the Vaca Muerta shale? No, because the pipeline system gets utterly trashed. That is one of the things that they go for as they start going. They send their hover vehicles inland because they realize there's nothing really in Buenos Aires that's worth taking out. But the vehicles are all drones, like they were in the film, but in this time, they really are drones. They're not being like singularly controlled by one alien each, like they were in the film. In this case, there would be like there's one alien per each like 4 to 8 squad group of, say, these hover vehicles that has a few screens in front of him, and is seeing what they're doing and has already told them what to do, and is seeing how they're doing with it, and is also seeing what's happening as they are also like defaulting to more basic programming if they have to engage in self-defense once we start engaging them in the air. And said alien controlling each individual group can like open up a touchscreen like dial thing chart that will then have the different web options to pull off of, that spin down into their own circles, which have their breakaway options. Each like controller controlling a group of say 4 to 8, whether these aerial hover vehicles or the semi-hovering ground vehicles, uh, basically they're all, each group is being run by a really powerful AI system that is each being controlled by a actual living alien who is adjusting things as the situation develops and telling them do this in this way, or these types of you know these types of the natives aircraft are clearly a bigger threat, focus on attacking those. Or in the case of battles where we have a aircraft carrier deployed from any particular country, obviously they realize pretty quick that we are dumping aircraft up into the sky really fast from this floating platform over here. Go over and target that before they're able to launch anything else. And also, telling them what to target on the ground. Like, for example, obviously, they're able to easily and quickly recognize oil terminals and refineries. And, thus, that's one of the things they tell them is they identify it. They basically would draw like a little square really quickly on a touchscreen, say, and, the AI would recognize that this is what they're identifying and would then, from then on, unlike our AI, which are stupid and immediately interpret things the wrong way, uh, like the whole thing where it was identifying Russian tanks based on whether the tank was in a snowy winter environment and was identifying US tanks based on whether it was in a desert environment. So the moment US tanks were in a winter environment or we showed Russian tanks in a non-winter environment like a regular temperate field, it immediately, the AI just seized up and had a seizure. Their AI is, obviously maybe 100, 200 years more advanced. It actually functions and can do what it's told very effectively. So it then will, on its own, recognize like what that was and will start comparatively imaging things as it flies along. So they do stuff like that where they are controlling it sort of. They are AI drones, but they're AI drones that are being heavily influenced and directed to do specific things. And in the instance where all the alien impactor vehicles that are floating in water over the aliens are, in the instance where they are all destroyed, and if they're still on land, they're semi-hovering land vehicles or these actual aircraft, if there are still any of these operating after all of the immediate impactor vehicles of that group have been destroyed by us, then these their vehicles, the land ones included, will fall back onto a default programming that their AI will run. In which case, it will then immediately, as is seen in different chapters, one showing different parts of the battle over Tokyo included, it will just start going into a into like an autopilot like circling maneuver where it will circle, spit plasma on a target that it has. It just starts pull. It will start pulling up target types from its base load of images that it's now operating off of, and continue like circling around the general target area while it flushes the actual weapon port itself with liquid helium to cool it down, since each shot is venting superheated ionized gas that's 14,000 degrees Celsius out through it. It then has to be cooled for a little bit, not too long. They're decently advanced, that they have some decent material engineering, but they can only fire one big plasma cone shot like every 30 or 40 seconds or so. And they're no small matter. Like, here, let me draw it here. Like, if one was passing over, say, this oil terminal here, the vehicle would be pretty small. Like, the ship itself would only be about like that dot. The plasma spray thing would cone out, and in terms of how far it would reach, it would reach a couple 100 meters and would be on a spread, and would also linger as well. as they do use this tactic when fighting us. When we're the ones that get behind them in the air, they will spray a cone out and go just above it themselves, while we, having sort of a slower reaction and turn radius time, like our fighters will end up flying into the cone of ionized gas that is now no longer 14,000 degrees because it's been a few seconds, but it's still, like 7,000 degrees. And thus, the fighter jet will instantly explode. But as I was saying in this regard, they just need to do like one pass over like a big target like this, especially an explosive one. And, the plasma spray will light all of these up because they're full of, combustible explosive fuel, which in turn will then light the rest of it up. And they use it in a cutting tactic on ports. Let's get to a port terminal with like some cranes. That's a power plant. That's a steel mill. They do take a lot of those out as well because that ties into what their actual objective and goal is. Come on, give me a actual port terminal. Give me a container terminal with like cranes and stuff. Where are we? Here we go. So remember, as I said, the cone goes a decent way. So it would spray out like that as they're coming along. They do this tactic actually frequently, and they'll spray it like that, and the plasma will just go for a few hundred meters, and it will, in this particular case, when they attack port terminals, it literally just cuts through multiple cranes, and they all just collapse on themselves or collapse over into the water, which, kind of then renders that port useless. But unlike Independence Day, they cannot just infinitely spray this. Like I said, they do have to divert away and take about like half a minute or so to flush the weapon with some liquid helium real quick to make sure it's cool enough to fire again. However, it's a really effective weapon. And the reason they actually went with their plasma weapons as their choice of what to bring on this trip is not entirely because it's an effective weapon. It is. It really is. However, it's not like it's not the easiest one to be working with, and it's certainly not the cheapest. But there is something, if you're familiar with instead of bringing thousands or tens of thousands of, say, missiles, precision guided munitions, which they do use back on their own planet. And it is called weight or mass. The more mass you have, the more it's going to take to accelerate you and negatively accelerate you to slow down on the other end of your journey. So this was already a big strain on feasibility to do this whole thing to begin with. If they had wanted to, bring hundreds of thousands of precision guided missiles or bomb equivalents, it would have then become impossible mass wise. So they went with the whole plasma spitting angle, and it works. Because, I mean, like, again, one pass from that will, take out an entire it will set off an entire oil terminal. Is as long as you bank in the right direction and fire the weapon on the correct, like on a correctly calculated arc, you could easily get like 3+ fighter jets in one go with that. One pass from that on any naval vessel is going to light the whole vessel up immediately. The munitions are going to explode. The fuel stores are going to explode. As opposed to like, it would take a number of missiles to take an individual ship out. But the primary reason was just weight and mass. They could not bring that much with them. And they, in terms of like the hydrogen and other air components to use as the fuel, as the munitions for those types of weapons, for the plasma weapons, they can literally just get that from the air itself around them, or from rather the water that they land in. They can just separate hydrogen out of that. And so that is like a basic layout of things up to that point. The targets that get chosen, or at least those that I have chosen to be the ones that get chosen, I think it ends up being like 24 or 27 locations in the film. I'm not sure I'm going to go that high because they wouldn't be able to send that much. But since they are just going off of the only thing they have to go off of on approach to us, because again, they don't have magical omnipotence, they don't somehow access the internet, which for some reason they're always able to do, and just understand like our language and our culture and what everything is and means like instantaneously, even though that's really difficult to do from like one group of humans to another. So they all they have to go on is what the biggest gray blotches are, and so they choose Tokyo, Seoul, uh, the Hong Kong, Macau, Shenzhen area, and later on Shanghai, because this is like after a full day has passed and the Earth is rotated around, and China is like in the face of their oncoming path again, of like one of the next batches at least. And after obviously they've learned they need to adjust their incoming angle because of the shallowness of the water in that region. Singapore, Jakarta, Chennai, Mumbai, they do two impactors in this area in the Eastern Mediterranean because they see Alexandria and Cairo, and they see not just Tel Aviv, but basically all of Israel is effectively crammed along the coastal strip there. And then they see the stuff up in Turkey and how condensed it is in Lebanon. Even though there's not like that much important industry or anything in Lebanon or even in that area of Turkey, with a few exceptions, again, they don't know that. They don't know what is where. The only idea they can get in some cases is they can start to see where it looks like our patterns of dense marine traffic are also, and they can see, pipelines and structures from space when they're, a large network of such. And so, apart from seeing really dense metro spreads in like Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and Doha, and there, although it's inland in Riyadh, although they see those, they also see like all the patches of what they recognize, and you can even see some of the pipelines down there in the UAE as well. They see what they recognize as fossil hydrocarbon infrastructure, and with the amount of maritime traffic they see has up to this point been going in and out of this place, they get that this is probably important, and they do, however, realize that this water is way too shallow because they can see that it's in a big, shallow basin. So they end up landing right around here since it's close enough that they can just pop over and start doing stuff, or so they assume. They do initially underestimate our level of coordinated resistance. They, like, their anticipation was just a bit off. They were expecting us to be more 70s or possibly what you might consider 80s. They were not really expecting uh, current modern military resistance. They were expecting like something getting towards that level, but what they end up finding us with ends up being a bit more than what they were expecting to find us with. They also, although they have to go a bit off and come in really shallow, they also go for London and the whole Amsterdam, Hague, Rotterdam area. Plus, also they can see all this other stuff like right around the area, and they end up, since Moscow's pretty big, but it's not actually a coastal city. They decide St. Petersburg seems like a good enough target. Plus, Helsinki and Stockholm are like right there. Not that they know anything about any of these places, but they just look like decent enough targets. They also choose to go for Lagos, and they choose to go for Cape Town. However, because of something we try as a means to combat them before they enter the atmosphere via redirecting the orbits of some of our satellites, especially some of the Kessler syndrome bound, like Starlink web things, we start uh, at the last minute pushing a few of those in their way. Since earlier, some of their landing impactors did crash through some satellites. Not that we did that on purpose; they just had no idea what our satellite orbits would be, and we, found their spacecraft are just as fragile as ours would be, so they can be easily damaged. So we end up having some satellites push themselves into the descending path of those coming to land offshore of Lagos and offshore of Cape Town, because those are two locations that will have the least amount of meaningful military resistance. So the ones hitting those coming down off of Lagos are really successful and cause quite a bit of damage. Those that are coming towards Cape Town a few hours later saw what happened to those ahead of them and decide to do an extra bit of slowdown since there's just ocean this way. And they end up landing a decent bit farther out than they initially would have expected because they did more retrograde burn to avoid like the quote unquote clutter that we put in their way. But that ends up meaning that they land a bit farther out, like, about 150 plus miles out, which that's how far out they are, combined with the fact that there's not really that much going for South Africa. There's not much that could really be gotten to them in the immediate time frame. So it would be a kind of otherwise hopeless scenario. This ends up being one of the two instances where we decide to just go ahead and use nukes because of that satellite action that caused them to end up landing much farther out than they were originally intending to. They're so far out that no one will be harmed from this, and even the EMP effects will be way too far away. So in this case, this is one of the two instances where we decide to just go ahead and use nukes. And to the surprise of no one, because they don't have any like magical shields or anything, the nukes kind of work. They work pretty damn well, actually. And then over in the Western Hemisphere, they go for New York, but they have to land a decent bit offshore. They go for Miami, and it's shaded lightly, just like this area. However, off here is several hundred meters deep, so that is deep enough for them. And they go for Houston, landing out here with a couple of them actually even impacting offshore oil platforms. And they, of course, go for the obligatory Los Angeles and just off here to go for the obligatory Seattle and Vancouver. They don't target Mexico because there's nothing near enough to the coast to target there, but they do target Buenos Aires and Rio, since they also concede that Sao Paulo is close enough. So they land in this sort of middle ground area right there, far off on the shelf enough for it to be deep, but close enough and positioned in between both to where they can reach both of them. And so, as might have been implied by the things I already described, and things I just straight up said, this is not like an actual invasion, because that would just not feasibly be possible to pull, nor is it as the line from War of the Worlds goes, nor is this an extermination attempt, because those who planned this, and even the aliens coming themselves, they're well aware that they just would not really be able to actually wipe us out. Regardless of what level of advancement they think we are at, they have some knowledge enough that we are like industrialized, but they, before arriving, they do not know the complete specifics. But will you stop doing that? They're well aware that if, annihilation was the goal, then there is no way that they could actually, quote unquote, win. But they do have a military objective that they are coming with, which is based on what I'm just going to refer to as a butchered, hyper-militaristic view on the whole von Neumann idea, which is where, like, you send probes out everywhere, to like every system, or self-replicating probes out everywhere to like every system or planet, to sit there and wait, because they might eventually have life on them. In their governing, whatever their form of government is back home, in their view, they have realized there is a civilization here, not too far from them, in celestial neighborhood speak, and they are of the view that, instead of the whole von Neumann thing of waiting around every planet because every planet might eventually develop life, they're of the view that any nearby civilization might eventually become a threat. So, best to at least knock them out while you have the chance, if not take them out. Like, by all means, if somehow we were really weak and they managed to completely annihilate us when they arrived, they would be happy with that outcome. However, they are not expecting that outcome. Both the strategic thinkers and the invading force themselves, the aliens who actually came along to control these drones and everything, both on both ends, they're expecting the force they sent to actually lose to us. They're expecting it to, in the long run, get wiped out. But the goal is to, at least to what extent they can, try to industrially cripple us to a point where we will be like set back for a good while, enough to where will be out of any form of near term for an extended period. It will be left sufficiently weak to where we will be even less of a threat when and if they send another force at some point in the future to do the same thing. Or, we would hopefully, in their eyes, not have rebuilt ourselves to the same level of capability of military strength by the time, if they send another military force to repeat this act. which they are receiving. They will be like receiving this information from the forces that arrive here back home on their planet around Proxima Centauri. They will be receiving and like reviewing, footage and everything that is going on once this all starts, so that they can actually get a specific idea of what we're like, how far we were when they arrived, because we will be, decently dealt a decent blow by this, which by all means we are. This is not a huge, uh, in my version of this story at least, this is not a huge human triumph thing. However, it is. It's not obviously not a alien victory, uh, but it's also not a barely survived thing either. We survived pretty decently. However, the damage that they're able to inflict is pretty substantial to us in terms of like on an industrial scale, our like civilizational capabilities. They do deal out like some really serious damage while they're here, which was the point. That was kind of the whole goal. And there there's not a really high immediate death toll because, as is seen in another chapter, the one I'm working on right now, where you, the reader, the viewer, are like wherever you would be, whether in your home or in a hotel room, you're watching currently the ongoing combat in Mumbai as that one has started, and you're actually watching this via the viewpoint of one of numerous Indian, streamers or social media influencers who, went down with their like, Starlink satellite internet backpack to live stream the alien invasion, uh, thinking, that they were going to probably go get killed for the sake of views. However, to yours and their surprise, they actually don't die because when the alien like land vehicles start coming on shore really close to them, they realize that they are completely ignoring them and do not care that they're there. And even people, for a lot of people who didn't like evacuate the city, even as they pass by large groups of people, the alien vehicles, whether the aerial ones or the on land ones, also completely ignore like large groups of people as well, because their whole thing is capability targets, industrial targets. They don't care about focusing on like killing actual people because they're not, especially in this case, they're not like an immediate threat. However, they also know, like, as long as they do the damage they intend to do, a huge chunk of people are just going to die anyways in the aftermath, like in the coming weeks and months, which is what ends up happening, especially because there is a decent level of disruption to, grain and food shipments around the world. So, especially in uh, regions of the world that are pretty dependent on imports, there's a pretty high starvation toll that ends up coming in the following year or so after everything is done and settled. But also, let's see, on thinking a few other things. I'm running overtime. There is no communication with them, even with those of them who end up fighting against their own force, because again, like I said, they're not a hive mind. Some of those that came along uh, actually do end up sort of committing mutiny on a few of their impactor vessels at sea, and take control of you know some of those controllers then control some of their drone squadrons to actually start attacking the other drone squadrons that are still trying to like destroy stuff. Even those that are end up quote unquote fighting with or for us, there is no communication between us whatsoever because that would, for all intents and purposes, effectively be impossible because we there is a huge bridge of gap between like what does our not even just like what sounds do we make versus they make to like communicate with each other, like what is even the structure of the system of sounds that you could call their language that they communicate with each other with, because we have a system that's pretty similar throughout the world. You have nouns, you have verbs and adjectives, and you have future, past, and present tense. Some languages, like a lot of you European language, are obnoxious and have your conjugation of every single word based on what other words are where in the sentence. But there will be no like idea like would they have a structure like that? Would it function completely differently? What does their thought process even look like in their head, in their internal monologue? It's called. So there, at no point is there any like actual form of communication. Not even like we, as in an interview in one chapter, the U.S. Defense Secretary says uh, what they're doing is communication enough. They've communicated with us pretty clearly based on what they're doing, and then actually says the same thing about like the turncoat aliens, what few of them there are that actually somewhat fight against their own invasion force, that their actions are a clear enough form of communication as well. Just the, in a different way and from a different angle. But there's no like actual communication that goes on. We do attempt some once we realize that it's aliens. Like NASA has SETI listen to see if they're actually sending us any signals while they're still like on their way a few days out, which they're not because they don't care. They're not interested in communication, obviously. And they then have SETI, like, spam them with Fibonacci sequence, spam them with, some oscillating radio waves that match the resonating frequency of hydrogen atoms. Just throw anything at them that might get them to respond, which they don't respond because that's not what they're interested in doing. And I think that's everything for this one, at least everything I can pull off the top of my head. There, I do have like some maps I'm compiling because things get broken down, like in Europe amongst NATO members, for example. Since there's the three target areas, they're going for London, the Amsterdam, Rotterdam area, and St. Petersburg. Things get divided, and countries like militaries get assigned to a specific like region, a specific expected attack area or target. I don't know if like the official term would be in this case like zone of responsibility, but you get like zone of responsibility echo for England and like Portugal and Spain and Norway send what they can as quickly as they can over to the UK to Zor Echo to help in the defense of London once this starts, and A Alpha for Amsterdam. That would be like Zor Alpha, and obviously the Netherlands military gets assigned to the defense of the Netherlands coast. So does Belgium. So does Belgium and Germany and Denmark and the Czechs and the Austrians. They're not NATO, but obviously they are part of Earth, so they do volunteer to be a part of this. France gets split, and takes half responsibility between helping with London and helping with the Netherlands. And then there's Zor Romeo for Russia, the stuff that's going to happen off St. Petersburg, which obviously includes what is left of Russia's effective military, because motorbikes and go karts aren't really going to work on the alien vehicles. So those doing the heavy lifting for Russia end up being, portions of the U.S. force that's in Europe, along with the Poles, the Swedes, the Finns, uh, and a few others. Italy gets split as well. Some of them get sent up there, and some of them get sent to Amsterdam. And Romania and Hungary and Slovakia end up going up to Zone Romeo as well. And then the southern nations of NATO and Europe, those who are in or out, then come over to Egypt, Israel, and Turkey to help with the two groups that are going to be impacting in the Eastern Mediterranean area. And so I'm making maps of the zone of responsibility breakdowns that everybody agrees to be assigned to. Obviously, the Persian Gulf countries are all assigned to the Persian Gulf zone of responsibility. That one's kind of a no-brainer, hopefully. And I think that one will probably be it. I never even looked at chat after that. Uh, no, this is read the description of stuff. Low. Oh no, I have to be in here. Sorry. Me when I try talking about me when I try talking about my fictional alien invasion story and end up getting, seeing a bunch of chat messages thinking, oh, wow, these must be viewers that might actually be interested. And no, it's just uh, people who showed up who either for some reason think I'm actually talking about a real alien invasion because they're too stupid to read the description, or they think I'm talking about an actual war or something, or they do know that I'm not talking about either of those things and they're literally just trolling. I'm going to prefer to believe the third option because that's the more faith in humanity option, even though I don't actually have any of that. But yeah, that's where we're going to cut this. So thank you to not those two people, but everybody else who showed up, and to those of you common viewers who end up watching this afterwards. I'm probably going to end up having to lock comments on this if I'm just going to get a bunch of blue beam comments. But we'll see. Those two dudes will show up with their vault accounts soon enough. All right, then that is where we'll cut off here.